So I noticed that there have been quite a number of contributions on Moodle, and really well elaborate responses to the forum discussion. Thank you for that. So first things first, I want us to begin by discussing what you've read so far, especially on the lenses and the cases. My first question to you is, before we started, what were your thoughts on ethics in ICT? And after you saw the cases, what were the cases on ethics? What did you think about it? What were your thoughts after you looked at the cases and the lenses? Yes, please, Winfred. First, let's start with Robert, then Winfred.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I looked at I looked at all cases, but my write-up was about cybersecurity ethics case study. Basically, I analyzed the author, and my analysis was clear, elaborated in my write-up. But as far as Doctor, your question is concerned with the ethical lenses, I looked at deontology and utilitarianism lenses, and I realized that for example, one of the developer was trying to bring out the case and issue being openly, basically to show how Punk Slider can what exactly it can do, basically for the good of customers and the users, the end users, to be kind of transparent. And I looked at that as he was trying to mean and work with what deontology exactly does. And basically, that's how I analyzed. I looked at that case and bring out that lens. Secondly, I looked at the other lens, which is utilitarianism, and which basically talks about um, despite the fact that everything is going around, one is supposed to proceed with the deliverables. In this case, the punk spider was supposed to be delivered despite of the fact that it has some hiccups like loopholes, it has some bit of vulnerables, it has some bit of bugs. The project managers and the owners, and then they had to proceed with the project. They had to make sure that they do the release, which was version 2. So which meets the what utilitarianism talks about basically, which is a product has to be delivered, or whatever case it might be, in whatever situation is, it has to be delivered and the project has to go on despite of other hiccups, basically doing something and proceeding despite of other um, wrong, which is ethically, that's how I analyze it basically. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Robert. Most of the time for us in ICT, we may think ethics may not be something relevant, but we see everything we do as human beings has relevance on how it affects others. So thank you, Robert. Thank you for that insight. Winfred, could you give us your thoughts?
Well, thank you, Doctor. I hope I'm audible. I was on
Yes,
the
you
road.
are.
I just so come Linda. Please. Thank you, Doctor. When I read through the ethics, one thing I really came to realize was that in a professional, or especially for the ICTs, it is important that we be honest in whatever we do. Let it be when we are in the projects, managing them, trying to get these softwares, using them. Honesty is very important as an ethic. And I found myself looking at the golden rule. The golden rule, which talks about that what you want others, do for others what you want them to do for you.
Yes.
Once you have such a principle in the mind, you will always never go wrong. That is what I got. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Winfred. I'm interested to know, as ICT professionals, if you've ever faced ethical dilemmas as ICT professionals, if anyone has ever faced an ethical dilemma.
Yes, Doctor?
Yes, please. Yes, Jan.
Yes, probably one that I've faced is your superior wanting a password of a subordinate. And maybe say you're a system administrator, and maybe they have personal issues. So they want to access the superior wants to access the subordinate's information without their.
Yeah, I think that I think for anyone in ICT profession that is truly a dilemma, and it's something really you can empathize. When a superior wants something from you, you mean you're faced with an issue of obedience, and yes, Moses, and then Robert, and then Abu Baker next. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Doctor. Hope I am audible.
Yes, you are.
What I face mostly as for me is where I work for. I am in charge of some ICT facilities, but these people are not willing, even as of now, to pay for licenses for Windows. So you are there, you have the machine is how to operate, but again you have to be tempted.
Hello, Moses.
What to either collaborate me as for me. Hello.
Sorry, Moses, you broke off there a bit.
Yes,
Okay, let's go to Robert.
Thank you so much. Well, a couple of times we do buy software applications. We develop software applications as I'm talking as as a developer basically. So we develop applications and systems, and most of the users do not read the terms and conditions. They rarely don't do that. And ethically, what I usually see is that our superiors tell us to collect consumer data, and this violates data privacy of all the users and the end users. So basically, it is completely wrong, but for business perspective and goals of the bosses, they want you to collect data by force. Basically, you just like run that script, run the code, let it collect their data. And they put the terms and conditions. People will just click agree, I agree. Basically, privacy data, it's not, to me, it's not really ethical to collect someone's private data when they're not in agreement.
Yeah, and you see for the top bosses, for them, they're looking at what strategies of gaining profit or something, and that may not seem like something they're interested in respecting. Thank you so much, Robert, for that. Abu Baker?
Thank you, Doctor. For me, the biggest ethical violation, or kind of that thing that I faced, was when I had just graduated campus. I was hired by one of the leading fleet monitoring systems companies in Uganda to integrate their system with another system at Tanzania Revenue Authority. But the biggest ethical problem was when the CEO here for that fleet monitoring system company asked me to, because there was a certain system at TRA that he wanted source code for, and he was like, meanwhile, as you're integrating, as you're setting up, please get me that source code. So I remember I was like, but that is not right.
Yes.
And he wasn't happy. Lucky enough, I finished the integration faster than I was supposed to be. But I remember, because I didn't get that thing, we didn't go on so much. So just because I said that was not right.
Yes. Thank you so much, Abubakar. Moses? Yes, Moses, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Doctor, again.
Yes,
I
yes,
had to
Moses.
change my target. I was saying that me, the ethical dilemma that I face even as of now is that my boss is not willing to pay for software licenses, yet they expect the machine to be running. So it is really a dilemma that you have to think about where should you go for.
Yes. Thank you so much, Moses. Actually, pirated software is a big issue, not just in Africa, but even in developed countries. It's a big issue. There are lots of debates around it. And one of the things we are going to notice as we go through this course unit, there's no one size fits all, but those ethical dilemmas affect us as ICT professionals. And one of the objectives of this course the major objective for any human being is how to make a case-by-case, day-to-day basis structure framework that can guide us to make the best possible decision, the best possible decision for ourselves and for others. And that's what we're trying to do. One of the things I want to make clear, I remember one of the classes we had, there was a student who kept, whenever we had these discussions, actually kept throwing Bible scriptures to support. One of the things we must understand is ethics is not about making one a saint, okay? That is for God. It's not for it's a course, a module or a course unit cannot make one a saint. But it's just to see how we can make good decisions as professionals, how we can make good decisions for ourselves, for the organization in which we work for, and for others. Essentially, just how to make those good decisions. Because we live in a world of human beings. And one of the big mistakes some people make is thinking that because we're dealing with technology, and technology is essentially neutral in quotes, we assume technology cannot have any ethical effect, but we can already see that's not the case. So thank you for that participation. And I'll also give feedback on the forum discussion that you've had. But for now, let's begin an introduction discussion. And I hope we can have as much discussion as we possibly can concerning this, because ethics requires discussion and sometimes agreements or disagreements. Ethical dilemmas can cause quite a bit of disagreements. But that is the whole point of ethics, to have a discussion, to have an open discussion. And that's the whole point. In ethics, we really need to have open discussions. If I can just put you through certain things people have discussions in life. I think one of the most open debated things are usually the US elections. who has been following the just concluded US elections, which have brought in Donald Trump as the current president? And if before we begin, what are people's thoughts on that situation? Hello? Colleagues, what are your thoughts, for example, on the current US elections? You know, there have been so many debates, especially on Trump withdrawing funding for USAID, and I know a number of organizations in Uganda have been affected. There is the issue of deportation of illegal immigrants and so on and so forth. So that has raised quite a number of debates and opinions on that matter. Sarah says it's two-sided. Some people are impressed by the change, but others are unimpressed. Some think it's a money extortion scam, and so on and so forth. Yes, please. Is there someone who had a comment?
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Well, to do with the USA recently concluded elections, I mean, there are lots of contradictions regarding how the Trump wants to ride USA boat. Is to do with politically, economically, and basically socially. Because now, if you look at so to say politically, he has a quite a contradicting points to do with his foreign policies and local and domestic policies, which is it's really both ethical and unethical. The domestic policy, what was looking at politically, he was trying to duel with other competitors, rather rivals, and so that it becomes, of course, alone. And some people, as you say, they have a betting that during his campaign, the previous campaign, when the ex-president was still there, the gunshot that he had on his ear, people, so to say, people have got an idea that it was just staged for him to get the sympathy worldwide. That, oh, Trump, how can he get shot and without Secret Service being available? How can that happen to presidential candidate? That is another thing. So basically, they say, according how Trump is very shrewd, he can go to an extent of staging such an incident. That's what they say.
Yeah.
So yeah. So basically, that is the domestic policy, and then for the foreign policy part of it, it has to do with him intervening with points of Ukraine and Russia. That is not ethical because he was trying to be the mediator as a USA president, but actually is playing Putin's policies internationally or globally. So trying to enforce, trying to be the mediator, trying to bring peace between the two nations, but actually, to me and other people, they think that it's thought that it's not, that wasn't ethical.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please. Thank you, Robert. Yes, Winfred, then Abubakar, then Felix.
Thank you, Doctor. I just take a glimpse of what happens in the international scene sometimes for reasons that some things look too political, that some of us pretend like he don't play politics. Yes, yet it is a daily tool that drives every system. So politics is inevitable. Now, for me, when I analyze the way Trump does his things and the way he came into power, I realized that somehow, I think as Americans, you see, Trump looks like, not even looks like, I think he's a true American. He's a true American, and for him, he's not going to deal with people around, pretending. For him, he will tell you exactly what you have to hear. Now, in my opinion, he has a point. You see, you cannot be there thinking you will depend on someone forever. There comes a time, even if you are a child at home, there comes a time where you have to move off and also start your own life somehow. And I think when I look at the perspective of Africans, the way Africans want to behave, really, I sometimes support Trump. Africans want to over-depend, and they even forget themselves. For them, they think they are too vulnerable. Most of our countries here believe that everything good is only in America. This way, there is nothing good. That is why you see when we struggle to go to America, everything, we want to get visas and leave our countries. There is a president, I think he's a president of Ghana. I hope I remember that president whose son has been in America, and he had even acquired for him a lot of wealth there. And I think somehow Trump intervened, and then the president was so bitter. But honestly speaking, why would you get your son and take to America and acquire wealth for him there, and then he's studying there, and yet you are a president of a country? Why don't you elevate your own systems and have your people also enjoy equally, just like the way your son wants to enjoy?
Yes.
So for me, I feel there is too much to talk about Africans for sure. But on the other hand, we still want sympathy. So let him also be sympathetic in whatever he does. Let him be ethical. At the end of the day, what you do to others is what should be done to you. So let there be a balance. That is all.
Thank you, Winfred. Thank you, Winfred. Rebecca, then Felix.
Thank you, Doctor. I seem to share a common line of thought with Winfrey when it comes to ethics regarding how Trump works. I personally think he might be the most ethical president, most straight, most honest, and most person who looks at things a little bit more objectively. I agree, for example, say using John's idea of, say, the US-Ukraine. I personally sometimes think that, okay, if we can avoid something, let's try to avoid it at all costs, as long as it does not hurt people. So for me, yes, he might have cut funding and whatnot, but for me, I think that when we look at his narrative of thought, it's so much business-oriented. So his idea is, if I am doing something, I must get value out of it equivalent to what I have put in.
Yes.
So back to the ethics. So if anyone wants to argue with his ethical behavior, he might have to provide facts that prove to him that while we have put in this, we are equivalently getting out this. And most probably, this could be the reason that caused the clash between him and the Ukrainian president in their Oval Office. The Ukrainian president thought that he would have the same line of thinking like other presidents of hypocrisy and those things of trying to be good, yet you are not good. If you're bad, show you're bad. If you're good, show you're good. So he came with that kind of approach. Then he realized, this guy, actually, I have to show value for value, which is why most probably he's later like saying, okay, we can do the minerals. And the reason why I feel like the reason why Trump is so much into this Ukrainian thing is either one, get that minerals deal. Two, and the other opportunities like maybe like that have been presented by Ukraine. Maybe you can own our energy infrastructure, our energy infrastructures, our chemical infrastructures, those reactor nuclear infrastructures. Something like that is valued to Trump. It might give money, but as long as he feels that this I'm putting in this, I'll get out this, and he feels they are equivalent, then he will work. Most of it is why he has withdrawn from World Health Organization, because he finds he's putting in a lot of money. But the question is, what is US getting out? You know, why would I contribute 10 times more than the second largest contributor if we are in the same group? I must have value, extra value that I'm getting. So ethically, I regard him as the most ethical. Of course, I disagree with him on a few things. Like you said, that is around ethics. I feel on those few things I might not mention, but either way, really, where I agree with him is he's likely to be the most straight, most ethical, most objective president I've ever seen for United States, ever since I've been alive anyway. Okay. The rest seem to be always playing games. They show you this having, and the way bosses in the corporate presses show you, okay, we are elevating you to say supervisor A, B, C, D, and they do not, the responsibilities increase. Members here might know responsibilities increase, but they do not increase benefits. Say, okay, we shall give you 30%. Say you're acting GM, we shall give you 30% of acting GM's salary or 40% of acting GM's salary on top of your role, so that you be doing that. They will tell you, you do that for, they would approach it from the intrinsic value point of things. You will have growth, you have opportunity for growth, opportunity for A. They show you those intrinsic values, but surely, even if I don't get opportunity for growth, as long as I'm getting more than enough to do a lot of things that I want, is better than intrinsic value for some people anyway.
Thank you so much, Abubakar. Yes, please.
Yeah, that is it really.
Thank you so much. Felix, could you give us your...
Yeah, thank you, class and members. Now, Robert has touched a bit of on the chat, but also Abubakar has touched a bit. So this is it. For those of us who have been following Trump and his business management from the time of apprenticeship, Trump is running America like an enterprise. So him being an acute businessman, he's running the country like the way a business the way he would run business. That is how for him he's running the country. And so if you see what is happening now is that he has brought in tariffs. Okay, so these tariffs, according to him, is to try and balance the equation. Like Abubakar put it, that we have injected so much money to help Ukraine fight. So for him, as a businessman, he looks at that as a loss. How do we make gains? So the gains are, what can you offer us in exchange? Another thing that is currently happening is, if you see, he's saying America is injecting so much into the military. Can't, for example, Europe, the big guys in Europe, the big shots, the France, the Germans, UK, probably Italy, can't they come up and put together their money into their own force? So for him, is running this like an enterprise. And if you see his whole mindset, it is more of business and not just politics that we know. Yes, that's what I want to say.
Okay. Thank you so much, Felix. I think we can see when we look at these current issues, everyone has an opinion. If you looked at one side, you'd think, oh, Trump is a horrible human being. But when you listen to the arguments of another, you realize, no, there is merit to what he's saying. If you listened to, let's say, to the Democrat side of arguments, you might think otherwise. But this is how these things happen. That this is how ethical, when you look at ethical stands, the opinions and views differ. And that is one of the things that we must have a look at. And we must keep our minds open and realize, oh, there are different sides, but you as an individual, you as a profession, whatever ethical dilemma that you come face to face with, a decision must be made. And you must make the best possible decision according to your context. Now, when we look at Donald Trump, there are others who might raise so many issues. Oh, he's being racist. Oh, he's being this. He's being unmerciful, and so on and so forth. And I like all arguments point out, yeah, he has a right to first think about his country.
Yes.
He has every right. His neighbor, his most immediate neighbor is his fellow American, not Ugandan. That is his most immediate neighbor. You might think he's against your skin color, but it's not your skin color he's concerned about. I mean, if my sibling is the one who is hurt, I may not think about you. First, I may have to first think about my sibling, my niece, my nephew, and so on and so forth. You yourself, you may first think about your child before you think about me. You may first think about your husband, your wife, before you think about me. And that is the order of things. So it's, sometimes the Western society is so hung up on the past of slavery that they think they must first think about the Black African to be thought of as being good in quotes. What does it mean to be good in quotes? Yeah, something like that. So the dilemmas are quite many. But now our objective in ethics is to understand clearly what ethics, especially for us in ICT, and the organizational context. Yeah, especially for us in ICT and the organizational context. So this is what we want to look at. And today we want to have an introduction. Depending on the slides are quite many. We want to first look at the introduction to ethics. Hopefully, if we don't finish by next week, we shall continue and will flow to what we look at as whistleblowing, because that's a big thing and it's very much attached to ethics, to ICT. Yeah, very much attached to ICT, because whistleblowing, as we know it, is about information, and that's what ICT does. ICT provides a platform for collection and dissemination of information. Then we shall look at ethical theories, because those guide us, and then specifically go to looking at ethics in ICT and or computer ethics, as some would like to call it. So let us begin with introduction to this particular module. So the big thing is to have an understanding of what ethics is and where it falls in line with science and technology. Yeah, that's the big thing. We want to look at the concepts in ICT, specifically the theories that we find in ICT, and then have the practical side of things, where we can practically apply ethical theories to codes of conduct in ICT management. Now, when we look at specifically the three concepts that we're looking at, that we want to consider in this module, on the one side we have science. Yeah, on the one side we have science itself. On the other we have technology. Then the other we have ethics. Science, as we know it, is quite a broad topic. I remember when we were in primary, we used to say science is the study of the living and non-living things. And that is true. That is true at its best. That at its broadest sense, that's what science is. Then on the other side, you have technology. Technology, which is an offshoot of science. because this is where you have the practical side of science, the application, the problem-solving side of science itself. Then you have ethics. You have ethics itself. Now, on the ethics side, we are looking at what we should or should not do. What we should or should not do. Now, in the center of all of this is society and individuals. We shall see, if we look at what is science, some people say it's pure knowledge, others say it's an organized body, and others want to say it is unrelated to value, which is what ethics is. It is unrelated to value. What is the value of what I'm doing? Is there goodness in what I'm doing? We've had the discussion of Trump, where Trump says, what is America gaining? Out of all we have given Ukraine this amount of money, this amount of war technology in terms of cash, this is what we've given you. What is America gaining out of it? What's the value? For the previous government, their value was, we're helping a nation that is being trampled on by a dictator, Putin, or Russia in general. Whereas on the other side, Trump is saying, for me, where's the money? Where's the monetary value for this? You have a fight with Putin. Why should this be my problem? Why should this be my problem? The value, what is the value in it? So for everyone, their values differ. So the question where someone says science is pure knowledge and is unrelated, is that necessarily true? It's where where ethics comes in and says this viewpoint is biased. This viewpoint is biased. Even if you went back deep into what I've just given, it looks like black and white. The previous government that was government of the US, which was saying we're helping Ukraine, which is being trampled on by a dictator. There are others who argue and say, no, that is not necessarily true, that actually Russia was provoked. There are those who argue that Russia was provoked way back starting from 2014, where there were agreements that were signed on paper which were not adhered to, where Russia demanded that when in the agreement that when they were formulating NATO, they said they agreed with Russia that they would not, the Western world would not move further into Europe. So as not to threaten Russia, because Russia was specifically denied entry into Ukraine. But when NATO began to encroach further and further, and then eventually when it came to Ukraine, Russia said no. So there was a provocation. There was an indirect provocation from the West. Those political analysts provide that. So it's always not always black and white that necessarily Russia is being taking a dictatorial standpoint when they decided to invade Ukraine. So there's always a biased view. When you start saying that science is pure knowledge and therefore cannot be related to value, is false. Why? Because knowledge is generated by people. And as people, as human beings, we all know each of us has an objective. Just like Trump has his objective, so does Zelensky, so does Putin. Each person has an objective, and that objective points to their value. You may or may not agree with their values, but they still have values. Zelensky has a value as an objective and has values that he's standing for. We cannot deny him what he believes is right or may not be right. So does Putin, so does America or Trump in general. Everyone has their value, and those cannot be neglected. So the viewpoint of saying science has no value because it's pure knowledge is false, because that knowledge is generated by people. Yeah? That knowledge is generated by people. And therefore, we cannot say ethics cannot be, it should not be part and parcel of science. Let's come to technology itself. Yeah? The same viewpoint is made when we look at what is technology. We know it is the practical application of science to the case of problem solving. And here again, people may argue that technology is neutral. Okay, then let's talk about, let us say, nuclear technology. It's neutral in a sense, but when it was thrown over the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and to this day, you still see effects of that atomic bomb drop. What then do you say? Would you say that still technology is neutral? Would you still argue that viewpoint? So this is where it's insistent that ethics must be part and parcel of technology, because technology is developed by human beings. Is developed by human beings. So we cannot say it is devoured. These artifacts and techniques that have been developed mainly for technology's sake cannot be separated from ethics. We have seen the case, we've looked at the different scenarios each one of you, some of you, have given where technology, specifically in ICT, where it has been used in unethical situations. We've had one of our colleagues who has said where at his workplace, his superiors, management want to collect data from customers with or without their consent. Yeah? This is where somebody wants to use technology to collect information from individuals who have not given consent. Yeah? That's an artifact. You cannot say an invasion of privacy has not been done. So we realize that technology itself is not neutral as is purported. So what is ethics? We can look at ethics from several points. The first is we look at the actions of individuals or organizations. Yeah? Because there's an action of an individual, then there's an action of an organization. We look at the actions themselves. Are actions morally right or wrong? Yeah? Looking at actions of individuals. Now, normally we like to say, do not judge, especially from any religious point of view. We say we should not judge. That is very true, but we can judge actions. Yeah, the actions of individuals. We wouldn't want to say that this individual is good or bad, but we may want to say, we may want to look at the actions of an individual. Is this person, are the actions of this person or these organizations good or bad? We're asking, well, it's a question of conduct. The way somebody or an organization conducts itself. That's a question of conduct. Second point is, what makes a person or something good or bad? Their value. Yeah? The question of value. This is where we like we saw earlier, we saw the Trump administration has values it's looking at. The Biden administration had also its values. Yeah. So there's a question of everyone has different values, and that's it. You cannot say so and so's values are better than so and somebody else's values. No. Like we said, this course unit is not about making us saints, but it's about making the best possible decision. Of course, there are values that people are not willing to give up no matter what. Even someone will say, I will not give up this value simply because it's what I stand by. Whether I lose money because of it. For example, the Joe Biden administration was saying, whether America loses value or not, we must stand by Ukraine. And whereas Trump says, no, we are not going to lose money because of another nation. So those are different values, and people stand by them. I've watched, I don't know if it actually happens in real life. I think there are situations, for example, especially in the Western world and the US, where there are organizations which say, we shall not release information, even if it means there's a criminal case. Take an example. Where there are, let's say, my phone, let us say Sheba goes and commits a crime. And for the security agencies to be able to investigate, to pin Sheba, to find out, they may need to access Sheba's phone. Sheba's phone is protected by certain security levels, and for security agencies to access that data on Sheba's phone, the manufacturer should be able, they approach the manufacturer to gain access to Sheba's phone. And the manufacturer saying, no, we have an agreement with our customers not to breach their privacy. And you hear of situations where an organized company said, no matter what, we are not releasing, we're not going to give you access because we have a legal and moral obligation to protect our customers. Okay? You know, things like that. Look at doctor-patient confidentiality. Imagine, let's say you have a serial killer who has been seeing a psychiatrist, okay? And the psychiatrist, and maybe admits to the psychiatrist that I killed persons X, Y, and Z and buried their bodies in location A, B, C, D. And the psychiatrist refuses to release this information simply because of the doctor-patient confidentiality. Those are values, professional values people are standing up for. And in situations like that, they say, we shall not release this kind of information. Those are values, individual values people are standing for. So those are the first two sections which tell us what ethics is. What ethics is in its truest sense. The third is the next thing that tells us what ethics is how do I draw the correct conclusion after what I ought to do or what kind of person I ought to be? How do I draw the correct conclusion? That's the third level which ethics takes us. After we have those values of now, how do I conduct myself as an organization or as an individual? The next thing is, what should my value be as a profession? What should my value be? No matter what, I cannot break this code of conduct. I cannot. So the third thing is, what should I use to draw the correct conclusion by case basis? Now understand this, with ethics we cannot say we are simply going to follow this and absolutely shall we not we shall not move away from this. No, we take a case by case basis. Okay, we take a case by case basis. There's no situation where somebody says, I'm going to strictly follow this line of thought. Take an example. If you've looked at some of the ethical theories, and which we're going to look at in detail along the weeks as the weeks go by, you have different ethical theories. Okay, there are those which say, for example, the golden rule: do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And no matter what, you don't break that code. Then there are others, for example, utilitarianism, which says we look for what do the majority want. Okay, what do the majority want? Where do the majority fall? The majority may take an example. If we had a case where there was a certain individual in society who goes looking for children and killing them in the most brutal and terrible way you can possibly think of, killing small children. And that individual is God. And then the majority say this individual should be beheaded. The majority say for us to gain some level of justice, this individual must be beheaded. Okay? And then you have another person who says, no, all of us have committed some kind of sin, whether you've killed or not, you've committed some kind of sin. If that was the case, let's behead all of you. But then we're saying we can't do that. Then that's where the golden rule may come in. Okay? So there are all these different views. Which one should one follow? How should I draw my conclusion? So 1 and 2 are theoretical conceptual questions. And the third one is the practical. Practical question. How do I apply the ethical value? How do I apply it to an actual ethical dilemma? That is what ethics is. That is what ethics is. Now, ethical situations have specific characteristics. Number one, there are always differing views. There are always differing views. Always. I remember when I was doing my undergraduate degree, my undergraduate degree was in ethics and development studies. So we always had very, very lively debates. And one of the things that used to stand out was that sometimes the different ethical views depending on culture. Okay. Specifically, just to draw back from experience, I remember our lecturer, we had a lecturer, she's still alive today, very, very brilliant lady called Professor Deirdre Carabine. Okay, very brilliant lady, really brilliant. She's from Ireland originally, but still lives in Uganda as of today. And then, of course, majority of us were typical Africans. So I remember one particular case, we had a discussion. All of us knew Professor Carabine really loved animals. So she and the first Vice Chancellor of Uganda Matters University, Professor Michel Lejeune, had dogs. One of them was called Lady. So we all knew how they had these dogs, and they really loved their dogs, really, really loved their dogs. So, of course, for typical Africans, well, I mean, there are people nowadays typical Ugandans who also love dogs the way they do, the way they loved theirs, and I'm sure they have other dogs now. So, when we would get to those discussions and we talk about biotechnology and so on and so forth, and biotechnology ethics, we talk about things like should we use animals in scientific tests? For example, when people use mice to test on disease treatments and so on and so forth. So take an example, you inject mice with a COVID virus, infect it with COVID virus, and then start testing different medicines to see how it best treats the COVID. So, of course, there are those who argue that it's unethical to use animals because animals are not capable of giving you consent, things like that. So I remember during these discussions, some people, because of culture, would try to provoke Professor Carabine by saying, yeah, I mean, animals, they are here for our purpose. We should use them so that we can find solutions. And you'd see Professor Carabine really getting so angry, inwardly, but of course, being the lecturer, she had to contain herself. But of course, that's what ethics does. It brings moral disagreements. Yeah, there are always going to be moral disagreements, and there's always going to be controversy. There's always people on Polaroid sides. complete sides, people, one person going completely on the left, another person going completely on the right. But that's what ethics is. That's what ethics is. That's typically what ethics is. There will always be disagreements, but as professional individuals, as individuals, you are professionals, and if you have a moral code, you stand by it. And as an organization, there are also moral codes. Typically, what I would give you an example is in any ICT department, there should be a policy, an ICT policy, and an ICT policy helps greatly to align, to specifically state what the professional code of conduct should be. So take an example where you have a situation where your superior says, give me the password of a colleague that I'm clashing with. The policy should stand by and say, what does it mean to, especially for the ICT department, to share a password of another colleague? Yeah. And an individual can bring that one out as their defense, that this is something that we stand by, this is our code of conduct, and we should not go outside of it. Okay? So there are those which, whether you feel, you maybe even the person they're asking the password from, maybe if let's say I'm putting myself in Jan's situation, and they're asking me for Felix's password. Maybe whether I like Felix or I don't, whether maybe last night I had a quarrel with Felix, we went to the bar and I had a quarrel with him. Now my supervisor is asking me for his password. But that ethical code of conduct should be able to guide me to say no, whether Felix happens to be my friend or not. Okay? So there are those situations where sometimes we forget our ethical codes simply because we don't like the other individual. Moral theories. So we have moral theories, what we call ethical theories, which we are going to have a separate lecture section on, because this is what guides a lot of us and guides our codes of conduct that we come up with. So a moral theory consists of a set of moral principles, and some of them already you have discussed and you've seen them in the lenses, the different lenses that you discussed on. So these principles specify conditions by which we make ethical decisions. We decide on what is a good decision or what is a bad decision. So they are supposed to guide our moral reasoning on the practical side. So the theoretical side is that they set principles which guide, and then the practical side, we use those principles to make practical, to answer our practical dilemmas. So these theories basically guide our our different actions, and this is on a day-to-day basis. There is no one situation where someone will say, I'm only going to use this theory in every single situation. No, that is not the case. It's a case-by-case basis, and we use different lenses or different theories in different circumstances. Okay? In different circumstances. So here we have a structure of a moral action. You have the individual who must carry out a specific action. And that action has a consequence. As we all know, for every action, there is a reaction. That is one moral law that exists. For every action, there's a reaction. So the reaction is, the question is, what is the reaction? Is it good or bad? Okay? So there are some moral theories that say the action that will produce the greatest pleasure. The action that will produce the greatest pleasure is the action that we should take. The greatest amount of happiness is the action that we should take. So that one sounds good, but there are situations. Take an example. If each one of us in this classroom, how many are we right now? We are 27. If each one of us said, let us take some weed, we shall all feel good after we've smoked that weed. We've taken it in any form, whether smoking or any other way. We shall all feel good. We shall all feel good. So that's what one ethical theory says. Then another ethical theory will say, no, does this do harm? If you look at, take an example, if you go to places like Butavika and see what weed has done to some people, irreversible consequences. Irreversible consequences. Yeah, I heard of one particular case of a young man whose reasoning capacity completely has gone because of excessive use of the consumption of weed. He believed, he was in Butabika, he believed that his blood could cure HIV. And there was nothing that could be done. The consequences of taking weed could not reverse those actions. So therefore, the belief that let's take the ones who, the happiest amount of happiness, take down, if we take it today now, take us now maybe 6 months down the road and all of us are like that, or maybe 3% of us are like that, the consequences become different. Okay? So this is the structure of moral actions. So we have three major theories, ethical theories. One is consequence-based, yeah? And that is typically the one which says which one produces the greatest amount of happiness. Then you have the deontological one, do unto other, the golden rule one. Then we have the virtue-based approaches. What are my virtues? What are my virtues what are my values as an individual? There's some people, it's based on religion. My faith is what guides me. My faith is what guides me on what is the right thing to do, what is the wrong thing to do. Okay? That is virtue-based theories. So we look at the term ethics. So when we think about applied ethics, sometimes it can be misleading. It can be misleading. We may think we have a certain mathematical theory that we apply, and therefore it gives us immediate. So there's no such thing as applied ethics. Why? Because situations differ. We change lenses depending on the situation. Yeah, we change lenses according to the situation, and of course according to our values. Let me just give an example. We have the situation of euthanasia and abortion. Euthanasia and abortion. These are two highly, highly controversial situations, and people have different stands. Different stands and different positions on those two topics. You have countries where euthanasia is legalized and in others it is not. You have countries where abortion is legalized and other countries where it is not legalized. And everyone has their different arguments and positions. Okay? So in ethics, we do not have anything like applied ethics. Situations differ. So we do not have a top, in other words, we do not have a top-down approach. We have a bottom-up approach. We have a bottom-up approach. Do we have any questions so far?
Professor, could you just refer back to the previous slide?
Okay.
About the theoretical, yeah.
Which one?
No, the theoretical ethics versus the practical. Yes,
about not having applied ethics. Is this?
yes, exactly that one. Yeah, exactly that one. I just want to I'm just trying to digest how the theoretical ethics versus the practical ethics.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes. Now, we're going to have a discussion on these theories. Let's have, maybe if you can just have a look at it. Look at the consequence-based theories. Don't worry, we're going to have detailed discussion on that. But in simple terms,
Yeah.
consequence-based theories, or sometimes referred to as utilitarianism, talks
Yeah.
about what produces the greatest amount of happiness. What produces
Conservationism. Okay.
the greatest amount of happiness? And typically, we use this ethical theory in many situations. Take an example when in ICT, when we're trying to determine which technology is going to be easily adopted. We use consequence-based, which technology produces the highest level of pleasure. Look at things like smartphones. Why are all of us using smartphones? Because it gives us a great sense of pleasure when we are using smartphones. When I'm touching my screen as I'm scrolling up and down. TikTok, using something like TikTok, I scroll up, I get a new video which either makes me laugh or another which makes me feel good. Things like that. It's consequence based. That's why the reason why we have all these apps on these phones, it's based on that consequence based theory. And that's why people choose to put certain applications on smartphones simply because they give pleasure. Okay?
My question, I have
Yes,
a
please.
question. My question would be still, for example, the example that you've given about abortion, would you think still valid if it involves life kind of threatening?
Exactly.
Because consequentialism, someone wants to have that satisfaction.
So that now you look at it that way. If you listen to the arguments, those who are they call in the ethics disagreement rooms, you have what people who are called pro-life and those who are pro-abortion. Those who are pro-abortion actually refer to themselves as pro-choice. Yeah, pro-choice, giving a woman the choice to make over her own body. Then the pro-life are saying, no, life is life. No matter what, life must be protected. Then you have others who say, what about if it's a rape case or a case of incest and things like that. So different situations are brought up. And now that's where things become difficult. If those who are saying pro-choice are looking at a situation of a woman who is in crisis right now. I'm in crisis at this moment. Maybe I have just been raped. Or I am pregnant, out of wedlock, I am 15 years old. I am financially not independent. My mother is very poor, and maybe my father is not around, and so on and so forth. At this very moment, I just want to get rid of this crisis. And the assumption, I'm saying the assumption, I'm not saying it is, the assumption is that once you give this young girl that abortion, she will be happy. The problem has been taken away. That is the consequential viewpoint, that immediately let's take away this person's problem. It's like almost as if they're saying, if you find me hungry and you give me bread or you give me some cassava, you've immediately solved my problem. Is that the same situation with abortion? If someone takes the consequence-based view, is that the same thing? Or if I look at the deontological theoretical point of view, say, if I don't want my life taken away, why am I taking away the one in the womb? Why am I taking away the life of the one in the womb? Let's go to euthanasia itself. There are again arguments on different sides, different approaches. Take an example in Netherlands. The Netherlands, this is where euthanasia has been legalized. And of course, the situation is to take away suffering of this person. Let's take away the suffering of this person who is in extreme pain. Okay? On the outset, if you're looking at the consequence-based theory, it looks very good because the person is suffering at this point. They're in a lot of pain. So if we take away the pain by ending the person's life, we are okay. Now, that is okay if you, of course, you come from a non-religious point of view. If you're a religious person, this is where virtue-based comes in. You'd say, my life is given to me by God. But then again, there are those who don't believe in God. And for them, all they see is this life now. And then, of course, you cannot start telling them, end my life because I'm suffering. Then there's also the other argument of what should I determine as extreme pain that we should end life? Where does the measurement stop? When do we say this is too much pain and this pain someone can live with? When do we say that? Where do we put the limit? Take an example. In the Netherlands itself, there was a couple. I read this on BBC. There was a couple, a man and his wife, who decided to end their life together. And why? What was the reason? The man, because he had chronic back pain because of an accident he had several years back, and then the wife, because she was suffering from dementia. So they both said they end their lives, and their lives were ended. Another case was a 29-year-old lady. That's a very young woman. 29 years old is very young. And she said she suffered from depression. She didn't have any terminal illness whatsoever, was physically healthy, but because she suffered from depression, she applied for, and her life was ended. So you realize it creates, but all these people, again, if someone says, me, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, end my life. Well, there are those situations. So, again, we have to understand ethics comes at an individual level and ethics comes at an organizational level. Okay? It's not the position of this class to say this person is right, this person is wrong. Ultimately, everyone is responsible for their actions. Every single person, good or bad. But at a professional level, what do we do? Now, look at the case of abortion. It's a very hot debate, really hot debate. Ultimately, even if whether you put laws to end abortion or not, if an individual decides to carry out an abortion, they will do it, with or without laws. If an individual decides, if a young lady decides, and ultimately, whoever gets pregnant ultimately is a mother, because you have, whether it is through rape or whatever the case, the person is a mother. For people, those especially who follow the virtue-based theories, what they do, like let's say in the case of divorce of abortion, what they do is to handle the crisis. What the virtue-based, those individuals who follow virtue-based theories, they will handle the case crisis by crisis basis. So take an example in the US, what happens where you have abortion clinics, where it is legalized, in states where it is legalized. What happens? Individuals, people of faith, different faiths, what they do is set up pregnancy crisis centers. So and they normally do it directly opposite the abortion clinics. And they target those young women who are going for abortion. So what they will do is to address the crisis. So take an example, a young woman walks into their crisis center. They'll start by asking, okay, what is it that you're most scared of? And the person says, I don't have a place to stay. My mother has kicked me out. Say, okay, we have a place for you to stay. Maybe I'm worried about, I have no one to go with me to do the scan. Someone says, okay, we have someone here to go with you. They answer the fears. They answer the fears. So again, but coming back to ethics itself, individuals will apply the theory that best answers their belief system or their current crisis. Okay, so in the situations that those highly controversial situations like abortion and euthanasia, a person responds will use the lens that best suits them at that time. So take an example, the couple that decided to end their lives. Number one, as a couple, they believed their existence on earth depended on each other. Two, on how comfortable they were with their current health situation. That was their thinking as two individuals. And because the nation's laws allowed them, they used the consequence-based theory to carry out euthanasia. But if I'm a person of faith, that means I believe in a God. I believe in a God. The consequence-based theory doesn't apply to me in that situation. It is the virtue theory. Now, take the case of you again as an individual where you need to make a decision on which application is going to be used in your organization, which is the best possible application that we should use. Which technology should we adopt? You decide to use the technology that brings the greatest amount of happiness. So I'll give you a simple example. I'll give you a simple example. We all know it is not legally right to use pirated software. Not so. True or false?
True.
True.
So, if you're in an organization, and this I'm asking because I witnessed this in Uganda Matters University. Yeah, I know Jan amongst us is in the ICT department at Uganda Matters University, not so?
Yes.
Yes, Jan. Jan, I'm not, because I'm physically not there. Do you still have a policy, or do you still have also not the policy, but the practice of using open source software on computers in the lab? Is that still the case?
Well, we phased out that bit because most students are not really well versed with the likes of Linux, so we procured
Thank you,
computers
Jan,
that
for
are
that.
ready.
Thank you, Jan, for that. Now, let me give you a little bit of historical background to that. I joined Uganda Matters University in 2004 as a lecturer. And at that time, the Vice Chancellor was Professor Michel Lejeune. And at that time, the head of department of the academic side, computer science and IT, the academic department, not the operations department, not the ICT operations department, but the academics department was a Professor Victor. His second name was complicated. He was from the Netherlands. So at that time, they wanted to get a university license for Microsoft. Yeah. So when they contacted Microsoft, I think the license fee was so exorbitant, even more expensive than what is given to developed countries. That they, in protest, they said no. And the claim at that time by Microsoft was that because Uganda Matters University was unknown, so that's why they were giving such an exorbitant license fee price. So because of that, and because of the then professor who was very active in the open source community, they decided to put open source software, Linux, different flavors of Linux on the lab computers. And the reason why they did that, because remember, UMU was founded on one of the primary pillars Uganda Matters University was founded on was ethical values. So because it is unethical, depending on which side of the argument coin you are, it's considered unethical to use pirated software. They decided to use open source software. Now, here is the kicker. Exactly even what Jan gives us as a reason. Of course, open source software, we all know as IT professionals, can do exactly what Microsoft Office does and all its packages, pretty much. But one of the things that is a complete standout is that open source software, as much as it is well developed, and many people talk about the security side, for the user, the everyday user, the person who wants to write their document, the person who wants to come up with lecture slides and do all these reports and so on and so forth, Microsoft Office is much more user-friendly than most Linux flavors, hands down. And that was one of the big because as much as they did that, if you went into any lecturer's office, even in the vice chancellor's office at that time, they were using Microsoft Office, pirated at that, okay? Now, in such a situation, why is somebody insisting on using Microsoft? Because of the consequence-based theory. I want to use the thing that is easiest for me to use as a tool. I want to use the tool, the thing that is easiest for me to use. So you notice that even in a situation where an individual may say they are against something like abortion, euthanasia, but when it comes to pirated software, the person will say, I'm going to use the other one because it's easier, even if I'm using something pirated. I don't know if you get my point about the different scenarios.
Yes.
Yeah. So you notice that that's why we say it's a case-by-case basis. It's a case-by-case basis, and the situation that I'm currently in. Like we said, I remember one guy one time said that someone said they visited an office in Dubai where they found these guys using pirated Microsoft Office applications. And above them, they were in an office building, and above them was the Microsoft Office. Microsoft actually had an office there. So when they visited this is a big company they were visiting. They didn't mention the name. They're saying, the guy who visited them said, I am surprised to see you guys are using pirated software. And then these guys responded, yes, we are. And even the guys upstairs are aware that we are using pirated software. So again, the lenses change based on situations, based on contexts, based on different things. So I don't know if everyone gets what the argument we're trying to say. Yes, Moses, you have a question, comment?
Yes, thank you, Doctor. I don't know. Am I audible?
Yes, please, you are.
Yes, I want you to talk about maybe hedonism. Though I understand we have a session that you'll be talking about in these ethical theories.
Yes.
But then there's hedonism and then the consequentialism. I think one of them focuses on the pleasure of a person who is
Yes.
doing the action, and then the other focuses on the others. How will the people feel? Maybe you talk about, I'm
Yes,
kindly
yes.
confused about how the difference between the
Those
two.
two.
Is it consequentialism that focuses on others, or it is hedonism?
Actually, consequence-based is the same as hedonism or utilitarianism. They are one and the same. When we go through it in detail, we realize the consequence that they are looking at is pleasure, which produces the greatest amount of pleasure. And the pleasure is considered, that's what hedonism means, pleasure. And that's the consequence that they are looking for. That consequence, what is the thing that produces the greatest amount of pleasure? Well, deontology is the one which looks at the other. The golden rule, do unto others as you have them do unto you. Moses, have I differentiated the two?
Oh,
The
yes.
names
Thank you, Doctor.
consequence, hedonism, utilitarianism, they are interchangeable, but it's one and the same.
Okay.
Okay. So again, like we said, ethics is not a bottom-up approach. So there's no mathematical method that one will apply for every situation. No, it changes on a case-by-case basis. Yeah. Challenges to morality. What are the things that affect our morality? Egoism. Yeah. What mfunira wa? What's my self-interest? That's one of the things. Like I gave the example, the example Jan gave us. If your superior tells you, give me the password for some other colleague who maybe the boss is, the superior is going against. Of course, the superior knows, your immediate supervisor knows what he or she is doing is wrong, but probably again self-interest because I have a problem with the other person. But there's also a situation where even if they asked you and maybe you yourself have a problem with the other person and said, this is my opportunity to get back at so and so. For doing this to me, this is my opportunity to get back at so and so. That's self-interest. The ability to say, no matter what, this is something I shouldn't do. Whether I like this person or I don't, this is something I shouldn't do. In promoting my own self-interest. Yeah. The other is relativism. And this is one of the, even in terms of faith, relativism. That's your truth. This thing where we say, that's your truth, it's not my truth. My truth, when people say my truth, my truth, my truth. And we forget that there is truth with a capital T, or there are laws. Okay. Let us say if I tell you, if all of you say, I think every single human being says, the law of gravity stands. Everything that goes up must come down. That law of gravity stands. Whereas me, I come up and say, well, for you, that's your belief. Me, I don't believe in gravity. And we live in a society which does that, to say that's for you, your belief, it's not mine. But if I jump off the top of a building, I will crash. That is a fact. I will crash down, whether I like it or not. There are those fundamental laws. But then there's also difference in cultures. That is, the law of gravity is an extreme case. That one is a clearly defining situation where we should have, where certain things stand, whether we like it or not. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. There are those standards. But then we also have what we call difference in cultures. And we have different laws, norms. There are different norms and situations. So let me give a typical example a very, very typical example. If you go to the Western world, especially Europe, we have something like traffic laws. The traffic laws where they would say, if you're driving on this road, this is the speed limit. Now, I remember there was a European who was telling me that if you went to a country like Norway and the speed limit is 50, you'll find most people are driving at 30. They really want to stay within. Majority of the people will be, but according to the culture of the Norwegians, they really stick to driving, sticking to the traffic laws. Whereas if you go to Italy or Rome, it's very common for someone to come and cut right in front of you. Driving badly is part and parcel of the culture of Italians. So there it becomes the relativism, because of culture, the way we do things. Look at situations like Japan. There was I think I've told this story a number of times. Sometimes I forget where I've told it. Where there was a company that was selling yogurt that went to Japan. So before they put their products on the market, they did a market survey. They got a number of people, a number of participants, gave them the yogurt samples and asked them to test and give feedback. Now, every time they gave these people, of course, they were Japanese natives, they were asking them to say yes or no, and these people would smile and bow. So they thought, oh, these guys like the yogurt. They put the yogurt on the market and it flopped terribly. What they didn't realize that in Japan, it was considered very rude to say, I don't like this thing. Yeah. Whereas you find in other situations, in other countries, it is considered very good to state exactly what you feel. I lived in the Netherlands for about a year. And that's one of the things you notice. The Dutch are very good at telling you exactly what they feel. State it exactly. It may hurt, but that's their culture. It's quite common. That's considered the norm. So differences in cultures and relativism may cause a challenge to morality or ethical decision making. Moral skepticism. Moral skepticism. Why should I be moral? Why should I be moral? What's the justification for being moral? What's the justification? And that's another challenge to morality. Because there's obviously no reward for it. It's the same thing as, why should I get up and teach you today? Why should I get up and teach you today? Well, the paycheck is a good one. At the end of the month, I get my salary in my account, and I can do ABCD. But I can also decide to rush through the course and say, these people are wasting my time. Let me just rush through these slides for the sake of it. After all, they will pay me. I can rush through it. After all, I will be paid. Give them just 2 lectures, and that's it. And I say I have taught. Who will report me amongst the students? Who will report me? Why should I be moral? So those are the challenges to morality, to ethics. Then there's what we call ethical claims that are either fictitious, according to error, neither true nor false. They are not answerable to any reality. There's no such thing as being moral, where people's realities differ. Again, here I want to bring up a case. And I think mostly these are narcissists or psychopaths or people with very, very antisocial mental situations. I think this is where they may fall. there was a case in Germany several years back. I think this would have been in the early 2000s. Yeah, I think the early 2000s or something like that. A case situation happened in Germany where a man posted on the internet that he wished to eat somebody. A case of cannibalism, but he actually put out a request. He did not go and hunt people, he did not go on a rampage of hunting, like, you know, where the situations where some people go and maybe capture someone by force and kill them and then cook them and eat. No, it wasn't the situation. For him, he put out a request over the internet that he wished to eat somebody. And he was asking for volunteers. And a volunteer came up and said he was willing to be eaten. So after they finished, and the whole time they were doing these things, he did these things, he made a video recording, and he first dragged this man. So when he had dragged him severely, he first cut off a certain part of the body. I will not mention the part, cooked it, and before this one had died, they ate it together. Then when this one had completely died, he began to eat him in bits and pieces. So by the time police came, there were of course some parts which were frozen in the fridge, and of course there were the recordings of this man, the action he did. He did not deny anything. So of course the legal dilemma was that there had been no law against cannibalism. That was the legal part. They couldn't do anything for this man. But of course, the heinous act he did was a reality, because they said the person who told me the story was actually a German citizen who told me that the policemen and women, the police personnel who were investigating the case, that they were so traumatized they actually had to receive some counseling, because the videos they watched, it was so traumatizing to see a human being doing this to another human being. But you realize for the two who participated, both the one who ate and the one who was eaten, they didn't seem to think there was anything wrong with what they were doing. They didn't seem to think there was anything wrong with what they were actually doing. So there are those situations where people do not actually see. Remember, the previous case of skepticism is where somebody actually knows that there is a situation of right or wrong, but what's the justification? I may not earn anything out of it. In this situation where somebody believes there is no right or wrong, I can do it because I feel like doing it. I can eat another human being, and I can also be eaten. Yeah? So far, do we have any question? Yes, Moses.
Yes, thank you, Doctor. What is running to my mind, because I hear you are mentioning ethics, then morality, then
Yes.
law. So I understand that morality or moral values, these are agreed on principles of what
Yes.
should be right in a given setting. For example, we say in Baganda, you kneel when you are what? You are greeting.
Yes.
So someone can be moral right when she does so in Buganda. When he goes, maybe I hear, I'm not sure, so sure, but I hear that both sides of Fort Poto, it is not an issue. I'm not sure you confirm,
Yes.
but my wife comes from Bunyolo. For her, in their culture, it is not mandatory to do what? To kneel.
Yes.
So it is morally right for someone from that side to greet.
Yes.
So
Yes.
then let us marry with ethics. So the right, does morality determine someone to be ethical, or
Yes.
is it possible for someone to be morally right but when he's unethical?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things in the literature, morals and ethics go hand in hand. They are the same. I think probably what we would say in every society, let's put it this way, if we are to look at the culture side of things, what we see as moral right or ethically right, we are supposed to respect our elders. I think that's what it is. Now, in Buganda, the issue is kneel down when you greet, and wherever you are, kneel down. Now, in Toro, Bunyoro, it's kneeling down is also part and parcel of the cultural practices. I think the question is, how do they put that moral into practice? So for the Batoro Banyoro, yes, kneeling is part and parcel. We should kneel. But if you're outside, if I find you in the house, I find my elder, let's say if I find my father or mother, I kneel down, if I'm in the house. But if I'm outside, I may not necessarily do it. I may just bend as a show of respect, but I may not necessarily get down completely to kneel down. But of course, there are certain situations when someone is really a highly respected person where you kneel down, whether you're outside, but it's not exactly as very strict as in the Buganda culture. So let's also come back to the issue of morals and ethics. In literature, the two are interchangeable, just like Hinduism and consequentialism and utilitarian are used interchangeably. So is the term ethics and morals. They are together. Ethics and morals. In other situations, you hear people say values, where people talk about values. Usually they are used interchangeably. Okay? Although we have the virtue-based, but usually the two are used interchangeably. Moses, I don't know if I've answered your question.
You have answered me, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Robert.
Appreciate it. I've got my observation is that things to do with the ethics, and I've just observed that there's a bit of relativism with people's history, people and society's history.
Yes.
Why I'm saying so is I'm relating it to uh, the history of religion. With controversial statements that have keep going on viral these days with different religious leaders in Kampala, where now they are coming up with statements that Jesus did not bring any religion, and then Jesus is not coming back. So because of I don't know whether because of so many philosophical readings and historical write-ups that are being discovered now, there's some books that are being hidden religiously in Italy, the Vatican, books like the Da Vinci Code and all those, the hidden chapters of the Bible. I don't know whether it is ethically or morally okay to divert the society in different direction in relation to someone's discoveries.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's a really good question, because I think what you're pointing to is one of the things that brings about, number one, challenges to morality and ethics. That's one of the things that brings about challenges to morality and ethics. And two, essentially, I think one of the things that also causes us to switch every time we are making a moral decision. But I think essentially it's one of the things that brings about challenges to ethics. If we move away from ethics, because remember, one of the things, ethics is not the same as holiness. Those are two different things. Ethics and holiness are two completely different things. ethics is about us making a good decision in different situations. And holiness is getting closer to God. But however, that the thing that causes challenges to both is one and the same. And that is what I believe what causes relativism is too much information. Too much information. Wanting to know too much, where you end up abandoning a moral code. Let me give a simple example. For example, the example that Moses gave. Imagine a young girl from Buganda, a young Muganda girl who has been brought up. Let us say Moses and his wife have their daughter, and they raise her up telling her, you are in Muganda and this is our culture. When you're greeting anyone, you find anyone, your elder, kneel down and greet them. Then this young girl grows up, goes into secondary school, and finds different people from different homes, different cultures. And then you reach a home. I remember there was a girl I studied with in secondary school. And her father, I believe she's still alive, so I'm going to say her father is a Muganda, her mother is Indian. And I remember this girl was narrating how when relatives from her father's side came home, one relative of her father's came home and she came to greet I think it was the grandparents, and she came to greet the grandparents. She was wearing a hat and she stood up and she was standing and greeting the grandparent. And the grandparents were complaining, saying that this girl, doesn't she know we are grandparents? Can she remove the hat and kneel down? But she was proudly saying that she was following her mother's side of culture, where it was not deemed necessary to show respect simply by not kneeling. So you imagine Moses' young daughter goes to a school like this and hears this from a girl who is purportedly a fellow Muganda, and she chooses to pick that information and make it her own. She's picking up relativism, okay? Picking up too much information. So also it is in terms of faith. Now this one, of course, faith, and again, I want to state, holiness and ethics are not the same thing. They are not the same thing. So if the same thing with faith, whichever faith it is, whether you are a Catholic, whether you are another Christian denomination, whether you're Muslim, whatever it is, your religious faith can be tainted, very, very easily tainted. But again, in terms of ethics, it depends on you where individuals need to make a decision. If you have a moral code of conduct within your organization, it can be there and an individual decides to use it or not, decides to be respectful to it or not. Take an example, like the example Jan gave us. If in his situation, they had an ICT policy, and Jan can decide to respect the ICT policy, which says no one, especially the ICT department, has the right to get the password of another. Or Jan can decide to respect it. Jan can decide to say, you know what, my boss will give me a promotion. Let me give him the password. He can decide to do that. So at the end of the day, Robert, I think to answer your question, ultimately ethics, like anything, depends on the individual making a decision or the organization making a decision and say we are going to follow this or not. Take an example. I think somebody else, was it Abu Bakr? I don't remember who said a situation where the organization wants to collect information from its customers with or without their consent. Now you may find that organization even has a policy which says of respecting the privacy, or rather data privacy. Actually, as a country, we have a Data Protection Act. We actually have it. And this should be reflected in any ICT policy of any organization. Now, you find maybe Abu Baker's employees, they are fully aware that act exists. And maybe even the organization has a policy of data protection. But at a particular point in time, because they are more interested in profit than in protection, they will ignore. Okay? So even if as much as we have ethics, even in this class, we are learning about ethics. But actually, at the end of the day, it falls down to individual level to pick up your moral code of conduct and follow it. It comes up to an organization's ability to pick up a moral code of conduct and follow it. Let's have another simple, very, very simple example. Every university knows that plagiarism and cheating, academic cheating, is not allowed. Not so. There's no university that doesn't know that. But however, how many universities actually put it into practice, where they check students before they enter an examination classroom, where they actually apply plagiarism softwares to academic writing? How many universities do that? Yeah, that is the moral question. How many universities actually put it into practice as entities, as corporate entities? So even at an individual level, let us say if I'm looking at ethics and holiness, if I am looking at my holiness, my faith as Sheba, and I say, for example, I am a Catholic. I am a Catholic and I believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Then tomorrow, I listen to an individual who is talking about legalizing abortion and how women should be given their rightful choice. Me as Sheba, what decision should I listen to the church or this individual who is outside the church? If the state comes and tells me abortion is right, should I listen to the state or should I listen to the church? The decision ultimately also falls upon me as an individual. So all these informations may come. Let's say for a Muslim, I'm going to assume Abu Bakr by basis of your name that you're a Muslim. If someone comes and tells you it is okay to eat pork, and yet your faith is telling you no, where do your values stand? As an individual, where do your values stand? What are your values? Why am I a Catholic? Why am I a Muslim? Why am I Anglican? Why am I Pentecostal? Why? Am I just going to drop my values because somebody else comes and tells me, someone who's outside even my faith? Or even someone could be within your faith and they come and mislead you, and yet they know this is the teaching of your faith. So those questions ultimately come out. And they are the same, whether we're looking at now the ethical side of things or the holiness side of things. On the ethical side, what is the code of conduct that you're following as an organization and as individuals? What's your code of conduct? I know some people who I remember there was a gentleman I met and he was so much against telling lies. And that's a very good code of conduct. Not to tell a lie. But now let me ask all of you, you men who are married, would you tell your wife that she has put on weight? Gentlemen, those of you who are married, would you tell your wife she has put on weight? Would you tell her her food is, the food she cooked today was bad? Question to all the gentlemen in this group, those of you who are married. Maybe Robert can give us another opinion.
Professor, my
Some can tell even after they have cheated.
Well, my submission wasn't going through whether someone can be the the truth can be revealed for the the ladies to wait. But my question was to do with since you mentioned about uh, the ethics of the university, how perorisms can be handled. I was just going to ask you, what's your take with the latest technological development like AI? Because quite a lot of people and students are going that direction, and some universities now have started accepting that they cannot do it with AI, and
Yes.
research
Yes.
is done with AI, and everyone is doing with AI. What's your
Actually,
take on that?
that's a very good point, and I think that is a new ethical dilemma which universities must handle. There was a case, I think it was reported by, I don't know if it was reported by BBC, one of these big universities, I think it was Harvard or something, where they said there was now an increased use where students were using AI to do their assignments. And of course, professors, if I was to think of myself as an academic, just think of myself as an academic. And it's a simple thing. Let me talk about something which I think had a profound impact on me as an academic, which was my PhD. And I repeated this to my undergraduate students as I was teaching them research. And I said, and this was one of the profound things which I picked up as I was doing the PhD, that research is about you. You're bringing something out of yourself. It's really something, and it's a piece of you that is coming out. Because you're getting to learn yourself as an individual, your logic, how you think. Now, I have never used AI to do anything, but I'm thinking, how much of me is coming out if I'm using this technology is it thinking for me? Those are questions I ask myself as an academic. I'm thinking of myself as an academic. So when I hear a student is using AI, of course, I think it would greatly improve the quality of work. But at the same time, in all honesty, how much of that is me? How much of that is me? If I think of the answers I used to give at undergraduate level, they're not the same the way I used to do assignments at undergraduate level. If you gave me the same coursework now, I would answer it different. But in all essence, that was authentically me. That was the level of my knowledge as Shepherd. That was truthfully my level of thinking as Shepherd. So I would ask questions. I think it is a question, it is an issue that we as academics must sit down and discuss. I can't say categorically this is wrong, this is right. But there's that question, that lingering question for me as an academic when I think about it. If a student is using AI, at this point, authentically, how much of that knowledge can we say is yours? Just like I say, as a researcher, one of the things that it brought out for me when I did my PhD is to say, when I did my PhD, it brought out a piece of me came out. And it spoke to everything that I was before and who I am now and who I, hopefully if I'm alive tomorrow, who I'll continue to be as an academic. So the question is, if this machine has thought of for me, authentically, how much can I say when I bring out any work? Or even for yourselves, if I asked you, would you say authentically that's you? If this is, when I do any assignment, it's bringing out my reasoning, my logic as Sheba. So now if I'm using AI, how much of that is truly me? Truthfully, how much of that is me, authentically me, as an academic? And if I was to sit down, one time I was seated with a former student who is now I would say maybe we're now colleagues. Okay, we don't work together, but he's no longer a student. And he was telling me one of the things he does now as an individual to make money is that he writes dissertations for people. So as he was telling me this, as Sheba, this is something that when I think of myself and what I've learned as an academic, this is something that I would severely say no to. But by the way he was saying it, he didn't seem to think there was anything wrong with it. Okay? He did not seem to think there was anything wrong with it. So I'd say in the same sense, this you can have somebody write for you a dissertation. What about if a machine does it for you? For me, I think for me, Robert, what I would say is, my take on it is that this is something that must be seriously discussed by the academic world. It shouldn't be something that a university alone should sit on, but every single university must sit down and as the academic world, this is something that must be sat on, and we sit on and say what should be authentically academic and what should not be academic. I cannot, as Sheba, come out and spell out and say, this is right, this is wrong. No, that is something for the academic world to come out and speak. Here I'm borrowing a leaf from the magisterium of the Catholic Church. The magisterium of the Catholic Church takes on issues that emerge, they take time to come out and definitively say something. Some things may take years before they definitively come out and speak. Take an example. There's a new dilemma that has come up of, you see, I'm speaking now as a Catholic. There's the Catholic Church is particularly against in vitro fertilization, because there is the Catholic Church speaks out on what is God's will as far as the child being born is concerned. The Catholic Church says it should be the sexual act between a man and a woman. If you take out the sexual act, then you're taking out God. Now there is a new dilemma that has come up on the issue of frozen embryos, because out of in vitro fertilization, we have frozen embryos. But the Catholic Church has not yet come out to spell out and say, is this frozen embryo a human being or not? But it is something they are discussing. So likewise, I would borrow a leaf and say, for us, the academic world must come out and clearly we discuss and then clearly, definitively come out and say, this is wrong or this is right. AI is here. We cannot say get rid of it, get rid of it. It is very helpful. I think I had a discussion with students where we said, maybe how can we use AI to support improving online participation? Yeah. So AI is something that is here, it must be used, but when should it be used and when should it not be used? I think that is the question. Yes, Moses.
Yes, Doctor. It is slightly different. Your elaboration was just clear enough to classify to us the position of AI and the ethical dilemma at hand. But I want to also ask this differently. Is it when someone is forced to do the right thing, is it regarded to be ethical or it is something different?
When he's forced. Is your question when he's forced?
When someone is forced to do the right thing, is
Yes.
it regarded as unethical action?
Now, I don't think ethics can be forced. That is one. But ethics can be instilled. For example, if you go to an organization and it has an ethical code of conduct, and by virtue of the fact that you've joined that organization, you've signed a contract. You've signed that contract, you're also obligated to follow the ethical values and conducts of that organization. So in actual sense, by the time you sign, you've not been forced, you've given consent. Yeah? If you're within a certain organization, you have given consent. Yeah? Look at ethical codes of conduct that govern the medical workers, the way they say the hypocritical oath, first do no harm. So when you say first do no harm, whether you like it or not, you have given consent, even when there are situations where you do something you don't necessarily want to do. So take an example, if the code of conduct tells you first do no harm, and then you see someone suffering and you say, I want to pull off I want to end their life using euthanasia. I feel it is better. You may feel it is better, but your code of conduct tells you otherwise, and you signed and you agreed. So in that sense, can you say you've been forced when you have given consent? I don't know. That is a question others maybe can chip in and give. Yes, Moses.
Yes. I think when you give consent, it's not a forceful action because you have agreed on that issue. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, Robert.
My question, okay, my submission goes to Moses. Just an example of I just wrote an example in the chat from saying that, for example, police forcing you to stay home, not to join a riot against for human rights. So basically, I'm just trying to judge and see who's right and who's wrong in that kind of scenario. For example, if a police is trying to keep law and order, for example, maybe it's for your safety, maybe something wrong can go on, or protecting people's businesses and the like. But then I'm trying to get out so that I can join people who are fighting for human rights, which is a good cause. So in that case, whose judgment and how do you come up with the right judgment in that scenario?
Yeah.
Moses, I was just trying to give it my input, Moses.
Thank you, Robert. I think that's one of the things I like about ethics. It really does bring out a lot of discussion, because it is something that really prompts us to think and think about different scenarios. Now, I was thinking, rather than coming into the organizational part and social responsibility, I was thinking we end here and then pick up next Saturday on these discussions. Is that okay?
That's okay.
Is that okay, colleagues?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay. Okay, so at least now we have opened up at least on ethics. Now, the next thing we shall be looking at is on the corporate side, and especially focus, or then from here, from the corporate side, we shall go to whistleblowing. So that will give us still on the corporate side of things, because it's very much as ICT professions, we are looking at ethics at an individual level and then also at the corporate level. So I think this will help us to transition okay in that area. So do we have any question or comment before we close off?
Can we get a recording or this?
Yes, please. I'm going to send it to ICT, then link it up on Moodle immediately.
Are we going to get a copy of the slides?
Yeah, the slides are already on Moodle.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Any other question or comment? If no, then is it okay if I wish you a good weekend?